You are already here, already still. The day has finished with you, and now the night holds you gently, the way it always does, without asking anything in return. Maybe your mind is still moving a little, replaying something from earlier, rehearsing something for tomorrow, or simply drifting through the loose scraps of the day that haven't quite dissolved yet. That's all right. You don't need to push any of it away. You don't need to do anything at all, except let your body rest a little heavier into wherever you're lying, and let your breathing find its own quiet rhythm. Tonight, we're going to wander somewhere very close and very far at the same time. Not out into the stars, not across oceans or centuries. Tonight, we're going inside, into the soft, strange and surprising architecture of the human mind, into the world that lives just beneath your awareness, working quietly even now as you begin to let go of the day. Psychology as a science is still young. In the span of human history, we've only recently begun to look carefully and methodically at the inner world, applying the same patience and rigor to thoughts and feelings that earlier scientists of planets and chemical compounds. And what we found is genuinely remarkable, not in a loud, dramatic way, in a quiet way, in a way that makes the ordinary feel unexpectedly deep. The mind, it turns out, is not a clear window onto the world. It's something far more interesting than that. It is an interpreter, a builder, a tireless, mostly invisible artist that takes the raw material of sensory information and reconstructs it into something coherent, livable, and meaningful. Most of what it does without telling you. Most of what it creates, it presents to you as though it were simply the truth of things, when in fact it is a version, a rendering, a best guess, drawn from everything you've ever learned and felt and survived. You can let your shoulders soften a little as you think about that. There's nothing unsettling in it. It's actually something quite gentle once you sit with it. The mind is doing its best. It has always been doing its best. So tonight, we'll walk slowly through some of what researchers have learned about how this inner world works. We'll move gently from one discovery to the next, with no urgency, no rush, no need to hold on to every detail. If something catches your attention for a moment and then slips away, that's fine. More than fine. That's exactly what this is for. Let's begin somewhere most of us know, in the quiet of late evening. There is something that happens to honesty after dark. Psychologists have noted it, and perhaps you felt it yourself. In the daytime, the mind is busy performing. It manages impressions, filters what gets said, keeps certain thoughts tucked away behind more acceptable ones. This is not deception exactly. It's more like a kind of ongoing social maintenance, the way we dress ourselves before we step outside. The mind, like the body, puts on appropriate clothing for the world. But late at night, something loosens. Fatigue gently lowers the mechanisms of self-monitoring. The social masks, as researchers sometimes call them, become heavier to maintain, and so words come more easily. Thoughts that would normally be redirected find their way to the surface. Conversations that begin late at night often drift into territory that afternoon conversations never reach. Personal things, true things, things that have been waiting for a quieter moment. This isn't just a feeling people have. There is evidence, or at least a well-supported framework, behind it. The brain's prefrontal cortex, which plays a significant role in self-regulation, in the management of impulse and social behavior, becomes less energetically active as exhaustion builds. And in that gentle loosening, something more direct, sometimes more honest, is allowed to surface. It's a small and tender thing to know about yourself. That somewhere under the careful curation of the daytime mind, there is a version of you that speaks more plainly after the world goes quiet. You're already in that territory now, in the late hours, in the dark. There's no performance needed here. Let your body settle a little more. Feel the weight of your limbs. There's nowhere else to be. The mind has a complicated relationship with attention. We tend to imagine attention as something we control, something we direct deliberately, the way you might point a torch in a specific direction. And sometimes it does work like that, but more often, attention is being managed for you by systems beneath conscious awareness, systems that are constantly monitoring, sorting, filtering, and deciding what matters enough to bring forward into consciousness. This becomes apparent when you consider what happens during what researchers call multitasking. The word suggests competence, efficiency, a person managing several streams of information at once. But what the brain is actually doing during these moments is something quite different. It is switching. Rapidly, repeatedly, cycling its attention from one thing to another in bursts, so quick they feel continuous. And each switch has a cost. Memory, it turns out, is deeply dependent on focused attention. When the brain is given the space to remain with one thing, to dwell on it, to process it fully, it encodes that experience richly. Details are layered in. Context is attached. The memory becomes something textured, retrievable, alive. But when attention is fragmented, when it is pulled between tasks without settling into any of them, the encoding suffers. What gets stored is thinner, less detailed, sometimes almost absent. There have been studies showing that people who habitually divide their attention across multiple simultaneous tasks gradually find sustained focus more difficult. The brain, like everything else, is shaped by how it's used, and a mind trained in constant switching begins to find stillness harder to achieve. The habit of spreading thin becomes, over time, a kind of default. You don't need to think about any of this right now. You can let your thoughts become soft and unhurried. There is only one thing happening at this moment, and it is this. The quiet, the dark, the slow passage of breath. Here is something that may feel familiar, even if you have never put words to it before. The warmth of another person's hand, when you are in pain, can genuinely reduce the intensity of what you feel. Not metaphorically, physiologically. Touch offered with care activates sensory pathways that have a measurable effect on the brain's processing of pain signals. It also triggers the release of oxytocin, a chemical deeply associated with trust, attachment, and the easing of stress. But there is something even more remarkable embedded in the research. In one study, pairs of people who were close to each other, who shared a bond, were observed while one of them experienced discomfort. When they held hands, their brainwave patterns began to move towards synchrony. The two nervous systems, in some quiet and measurable way, began to mirror each other. The pain perceived by one was softened by the presence of the other. Not because of anything said, not because of any action taken beyond the simple, ancient act of one hand finding another. We carry within us, all of us, an enormous sensitivity to connection. It runs through the body at a level deeper than thought. And in moments of difficulty, the presence of someone who cares can change the experience of suffering in ways that go beyond comfort. Reaching into the actual chemistry of distress, you can let that thought rest softly in you. The idea that closeness has weight, that being near another person who means something to you does something real. It isn't sentiment, it's biology. Let your breathing continue at its own easy pace. Let your eyes stay closed, or nearly so. The sense of smell has a peculiar power, and psychology has spent considerable time trying to understand it. Of all the senses, smell has the most direct pathway to the parts of the brain involved in emotion and memory. Most sensory information, when it enters the brain, travels through a kind of relay station, the thalamus, before it reaches the cortical regions where it's consciously processed. But scent bypasses much of that routing. Odor molecules, once detected, send signals almost directly to the limbic system, the region most deeply involved in emotional experience and long-term memory. This is why smell so often arrives not just as information but as feeling. You catch the scent of something, and before you've had time to identify it, something shifts in your chest. A ghost of a mood appears. Sometimes a whole scene assembles itself. A room, a season, a person. In experiments, researchers have placed subtle scents in environments and observed the effects on behavior. A faintly pleasant ambient smell in a retail space increases the likelihood that people will linger and spend more. The smell of something clean, something reminiscent of cleanliness, makes people more inclined toward tidying and orderly behavior. These effects happen without the participants being aware of the influence. The scent speaks to the body before it reaches the conscious mind. Lavender has been associated with a gentle reduction in alertness and heart rate. Citrus with a brightening of mood and a mild increase in energy. Warm, bakery-like smells create a sense of comfort and safety that has no logical source, but feels entirely real. Right now, in the room where you're lying, there is a smell. Probably several. You may not be noticing them, but your brain is. Quietly, without announcement, the olfactory system is taking in information and allowing it to settle into the background texture of this moment. The smell of your bedding, of the air. Perhaps something faint from outside. These details are being noted and filed, and one day, years from now, some chance encounter with a similar scent may pull you gently back to this quiet evening without your knowing why. You can let your body become heavier now. Let your arms rest without any effort at all. There's no need to hold anything. Sleep, it seems, is not only a physical event. It is partly a belief, partly a story we tell ourselves. Researchers discovered something surprising when they told participants at the start of a study day that their sleep data from the previous night showed unusually high-quality rest. Some of these participants had, in fact, slept poorly, but having been told they'd slept well, they performed better on cognitive tasks that morning. Their thinking was clearer. Their processing speed improved. This effect, which came to be called placebo sleep, suggested something important. The brain uses expectation as a real input when calibrating its performance. This does not mean that poor sleep doesn't matter. It does, profoundly and in many ways. But it does suggest that the frame we put around our experience, the story we tell ourselves about how we feel, has a measurable effect on how we actually function. The mind takes its cues from belief as well as from biology. It responds to what it's been told to expect. In a way, this is both humbling and encouraging. It means we are not entirely passive recipients of whatever the body delivers. We are also, in part, co-creators of our own experience, not through force or willpower, but through the gentler mechanism of what we come to expect and what we allow ourselves to trust. Tonight, you can trust that rest is coming. You can let the expectation of sleep be a real and gentle thing. The body knows how to do this. It has done it thousands of times. It will do it again tonight. Let your thoughts move more slowly. Let the space between ideas grow wider. You don't need to follow every thread. You can let them pass like clouds across a dark sky, each one unhurried, each one dissolving at its own pace. There is a phenomenon that most people have experienced without knowing its name. You are in a crowded place or a busy room, and there is noise everywhere, and you are not attending to any particular voice. And then, suddenly, from somewhere across that noise, you hear your own name. It arrives clearly, unmistakably, cutting straight through everything else without effort. This is called the cocktail party effect, and it says something profound about how the brain manages attention. Even when you believe you are not listening, some part of you is always listening. The auditory system scans the ambient environment continuously, monitoring without reporting, watching for signals that are personally relevant, and your name is one of the most personally relevant signals there is. Brain imaging studies have shown that hearing your own name activates regions associated with self-awareness and social processing. There is something almost ancient in this response. Across all the environments humans have ever lived in, from small nomadic groups to crowded modern cities, the question of who is speaking to you, who is calling your name, has always mattered. Safety, belonging, attention, the name carries all of it, and the brain has learned to answer even when the rest of you wasn't paying attention. This quiet vigilance is always running. Even now, even as you rest, some part of you remains loosely oriented toward the world, listening softly for nothing in particular, and finding in this darkness only quiet. That is a good thing to find. There is a quality to memory that we rarely stop to examine. We tend to think of it as a recording, a library perhaps, where experiences are filed away and can be retrieved more or less intact when needed. But memory is nothing like that. It is far stranger, far more alive, and in some ways far more beautiful than any archive could be. Every time you remember something, you are not playing back a stored file. You are reconstructing it. The brain pulls together fragments, impressions, emotional tones, and contextual details, and assembles them into something coherent in the present moment. The reconstruction is usually convincing. It feels like remembering, but it is, in a very real sense, an act of creation as much as retrieval. This means that memories can change. They do change. Each time a memory is recalled, it becomes briefly malleable again, open to influence from the current moment, from mood, from new information, from the simple passage of time. Researchers have studied this process carefully and found that it is possible, under certain conditions, for entirely false memories to form. Not vague misrememberings, vivid, Detailed, emotionally resonant memories of events that never happened. In experiments, participants have been led, through gentle suggestion and carefully worded questions, to remember childhood experiences that their families confirmed had never occurred. The participants were not lying. They were not pretending. They genuinely remembered these things, with the same sense of certainty that accompanies real memories. The experience felt true because the brain had built it, using the same materials it uses for everything else. This is not a frightening thing, once you hold it quietly. It simply means that the story of your past is not a fixed document. It is something that lives, breathes, and shifts over time. The emotional truth of your memories, the feeling of what things meant to you, tends to remain stable even when the factual details drift. And perhaps that emotional truth is what matters most anyway. You can let that thought settle gently. The past is not held rigidly. It is held softly, the way water holds the shape of whatever contains it. Let your breathing remain slow and even. There is nothing to figure out right now, nothing to hold on to. The mind has a notable tendency to hold open loops, to keep unfinished things present, hovering just at the edge of awareness, gently nagging. Psychologists in the early 20th century gave this a name, the Zeigarnik effect, after the researcher who first described it systematically. Bluma Zeigarnik noticed something curious in a cafe. Waiters seemed to remember the details of orders that were still in progress far more clearly than orders that had been completed and paid for. Once a task was finished, it seemed to release its hold on attention. But incomplete tasks persisted, lingering in working memory with a kind of low hum. This pattern appears throughout daily life. The project you haven't finished, the conversation you left unresolved, the thing you meant to do this morning and didn't. These sit differently in the mind than completed things. They have a small weight to them, a quiet insistence. Interestingly, researchers later found a gentle workaround for this effect. Writing down an unfinished task, making a specific plan for when and how to address it, seems to ease the mind's grip on it. The brain, it appears, doesn't require the task to be done in order to release it from active attention. It simply requires a credible signal that the task has been accounted for, that it won't be lost, that there is a plan. This is part of why a simple list, written before sleep, can make the night feel quieter. The open loops are noted. The mind can let go of them, at least for a while. They will still be there tomorrow, but they don't need to be held tonight. You don't need to hold anything right now. Whatever remains undone can wait until morning. The night asks nothing of you except rest. There is a deep connection between gratitude and the body's chemistry that researchers have explored carefully, and what they've found is worth knowing. Gratitude is not simply a pleasant emotion, a nicety to practice when things are going well. It appears to have a genuine physiological dimension. People who engage in regular gratitude practices, such as reflecting for a few minutes each evening on what they appreciate, on what felt good or meaningful in the day, tend to show measurably lower levels of cortisol, the hormone most associated with the stress response. Lower cortisol means a quieter nervous system. It means that the body's emergency response mechanisms, which are designed for acute threats and not for continuous activation, can ease back into a resting state. Over time, chronic elevation of cortisol is associated with a range of health difficulties. And so the simple act of noticing what is good, of turning the mind's attention toward what is present and positive rather than what is absent or threatening, has effects that reach into the immune system into cardiovascular function, into sleep quality. Psychologists describe this as a shift in attentional orientation. The mind is always scanning. That is what it does. And the question is simply what it is scanning for. In a state of anxiety, the mind scans for danger, for gaps, for what might go wrong. This is useful in genuinely threatening situations, but as a constant default mode, it is exhausting. Gratitude gently redirects the scan. It asks the mind to look for what is sufficient, what is good, what is present, and real and workable. This is not a forced positivity. It is not a denial of difficulty. It is a reorientation of attention toward what is also true, alongside everything else that is true. Right now, in this moment, you are warm, you are still, you are breathing. The day is over, and it asked what it asked of you, and you gave what you gave. And now the night is here, and it asks only this: rest. That is something to be quietly thankful for. Let your body soften a little more. Let the weight of it press gently downward. You don't need to hold yourself up against anything. The brain has an extraordinary sensitivity to faces. Deep within the temporal lobe, there is a region that neuroscientists have called the fusiform face area, and it is devoted, in a remarkably specific way, to the processing of faces. Not objects, not landscapes, faces. This region activates with a speed and consistency that has fascinated researchers, and its specialization is thought to reflect just how central face recognition has been to human survival and social life. We read faces constantly. We read them faster than we read words. In less than 1/10 of a second, the brain has already begun forming an impression of a face. Whether it seems familiar, whether it seems trustworthy, what emotion it might be expressing. These assessments happen before conscious thought has had time to weigh in. They arrive as feelings, as gut responses, as a sense of ease or unease that seems to come from nowhere. The system is finely tuned, but it is also, in a sense, overeager. The brain searches for faces in patterns that contain only the loosest resemblance to an actual face. 2 dots above a curve, a shadow shaped vaguely like a profile, the grille of a car, the grain in a wooden door. This tendency, known as pareidolia, is not a glitch. It's the natural consequence of having a system so primed for face detection that it occasionally fires in response to near misses. What this reveals is something worth resting with. The brain's investment in other people is enormous. It has built dedicated architecture for the task of reading them. It has prioritized, above almost everything else, the ability to know a face, to recognize who is present, to understand, in a fraction of a second, whether you are safe, whether you are seen, whether you are among those who know you. You are known. Somewhere in this world, there are people whose brains hold your face in a special way, filed with warmth and familiarity in the fusiform pathways of their memory. That is a quiet and real thing. Let that land softly somewhere inside you, and then let it go. Let your thoughts become more diffuse, less anchored to any particular idea. Consider for a moment the relationship between the body and mood. It is easy to assume that mood is an interior event, something that happens inside the mind, and then, if it's strong enough, expresses itself outward through the body. We feel something and then we show it. But the relationship runs in the other direction too, and the research on this has been quietly fascinating. Facial expressions, posture, and gesture all send signals back to the brain. The body is not only a vehicle for emotion, it is also, in some sense, a participant in creating it. When the muscles of the face arrange themselves into a smile, even an artificial one, even a smile produced by holding a pen between the teeth in an experiment designed to force the shape, the brain receives information from those muscles and adjusts its processing accordingly. Mood-related neurotransmitters shift slightly. The emotional tone of experience changes by a small but measurable degree. The same is true of posture. Sitting or standing in an open, upright position, with the chest uncompressed and the spine relatively tall, is associated with a different pattern of physiological and hormonal activity than a collapsed, closed posture. The body's shape tells the brain something about the state it's in, and the brain responds to that information. This feedback loop between body and mind runs constantly, mostly beneath awareness. The tension you carry in your shoulders is not only an effect of stress, it is also, in some small way, a contributor to it. The loosening of that tension, the deliberate letting go of physical relief, it is also a signal to the nervous system that the emergency has passed. Right now, if there is anywhere in your body where you are holding tension, you can release it gently. The jaw, the hands, the space between the shoulder blades. You can let all of it go soft. The body will follow the instruction. It has been waiting for permission. Breathe out slowly. Feel the quiet. There is a peculiarity in how we perceive time that psychologists have spent considerable effort trying to understand. Time, as we experience it, is not fixed. It is not a steady stream moving at a constant pace. It contracts and expands in ways that have very little to do with the clock and a great deal to do with the quality of our attention and the novelty of our experience. When you are in a situation that is genuinely dangerous, or genuinely new, or emotionally intense, the brain increases the density of its processing. It records more sensory detail per unit of time, and when you later recall those moments, they feel long, stretched, rich with detail. A few seconds in a frightening situation can seem, in memory, like several minutes. In contrast, when you are doing something deeply familiar, something routine and automatic, the brain processes it efficiently, with minimal detail. There is little to record, because there is little that is new. And these stretches of time, so full in clock terms, can feel in memory like they barely happened at all. This is one of the reasons that childhood seems, in retrospect, to have been so long. Every experience was new. The brain was recording at maximum density. The world was being encountered for the first time, over and over, and each encounter left a vivid mark. As the years accumulate and novelty decreases, the recording thins. Time, felt from the inside, accelerates. Psychologists suggest that deliberately seeking out novel experiences, learning new things, going to unfamiliar places, engaging with unfamiliar ideas, can gently slow the felt pace of time, not the clock. But the richness of the record, the sense, at the end of a day, that it contains something worth noticing, Tonight is a small novelty. You are lying in the dark, thinking about the way your own mind works, and that is different from most evenings. It will leave a small trace, a detail in the record. You don't need to think about that. You can let the details blur. You can simply be here, in the quiet, letting the evening become whatever it becomes. Let your eyes feel heavy. Let your thoughts wander a little more loosely now, without needing to follow any particular direction. The brain has a very interesting relationship with repetition and truth. Researchers studying what they call the illusory truth effect have found something that is both simple and far-reaching. The more often we hear a statement, the more likely we are to feel that it is true, regardless of its actual accuracy. Familiarity, the brain's quiet recognition of something it has encountered before, feels like credibility. It feels like something that has been verified. This shortcut evolved for good reasons. In environments where information was passed slowly and carefully, through direct experience and trusted sources, repetition was a reasonable signal of reliability. If everyone you knew said that certain berries were dangerous, and they said it repeatedly, that repetition carried genuine information. But in an environment saturated with repeated messages of uncertain origin, the same shortcut can mislead. What this means at a deeper level is that the mind's sense of truth is partly a feeling, and that feeling can be manufactured by exposure alone. The critical faculty, the capacity to pause and ask whether something is actually true, rather than merely familiar, requires effort. It requires a kind of deliberate slowing down, and it is perhaps one of the more important cognitive skills a person can cultivate. But that is not for tonight. Tonight there is nothing to evaluate, nothing to verify. The quiet is already true. The rest you are moving toward is already here. You can let the thinking ease now. Let the ideas you've been following become softer, less distinct, like shapes seen through frosted glass. They will still be there if you want them later. But for now, they can rest alongside you. Something remarkable happens when music enters the brain. More regions activate than for almost any other stimulus. The auditory cortex processes melody and timbre. Motor areas respond to rhythm, sometimes producing small involuntary movements, even when the body is still. The limbic system, that deep territory of emotion and memory, engages with the feeling quality of what it hears, and the prefrontal cortex, involved in expectation and meaning-making, follows the structure of a piece, predicting, anticipating, reacting to resolution and surprise. This whole brain engagement is part of why music is such a powerful retrieval cue for memory. A song carries not just its melody, but everything that was present when you first heard it. The emotional atmosphere, the physical environment, the person you were at the time. When the song plays again, those associated details can surface with a vividness that purely verbal recall rarely achieves. For people living with Alzheimer's disease and other forms of cognitive decline, this phenomenon has been observed with particular poignancy. Individuals who have lost access to large parts of their autobiographical memory, who cannot recognize family members or recall recent events, can sometimes still sing along to songs from their youth. The music seems to find a pathway that other forms of memory retrieval cannot access. Researchers believe this is partly because musical memory is stored in a distributed way, threaded through multiple brain systems, making it more resistant to the damage that severs other kinds of memory. There is something humbling in this. something that suggests the mind holds its experiences more deeply and in more forms than we ordinarily recognize. That even when the surface of memory has eroded, something remains underneath. Some residue of the past that music can reach. You may have a song like that. Something that carries a whole season of your life inside it. You don't need to think about what it is right now. You can simply rest with the knowledge that music and memory are woven together in you, in ways that go deeper than you can easily trace. Let the thought move gently through you, and then soften. Let your mind become quieter, like a room after a song has ended. Now consider for a moment the strange phenomenon of déjà vu. Almost everyone has experienced it at some point. A moment, ordinary on its surface, that carries an inexplicable sense of familiarity. The feeling that you have been here before, in exactly this configuration, saying or hearing exactly these words, though you have no actual memory of it. This feeling is fleeting, usually. It passes in seconds, leaving behind a faint disorientation and the odd sense of having glimpsed something just at the edge of understanding. Researchers have studied déjà vu carefully, and while a complete explanation remains elusive, one of the leading frameworks involves what happens when the brain's recognition systems misfire in a specific way. Ordinarily, when you encounter something familiar, two things happen. The brain registers the match to a stored pattern, and it retrieves contextual information about when and where that pattern was encountered before. These two processes usually happen in coordination, but under certain conditions, particularly in states of fatigue, mild stress, or what researchers call temporal lobe microactivations, the familiarity signal can fire without the accompanying retrieval. The brain reports recognition while finding no supporting context. The result is the eerie sensation of familiarity without a source. In a deeper sense, déjà vu offers a small window into how reality is constructed moment to moment. What we experience as the immediate present is actually a composite, assembled rapidly from incoming sensory information, stored patterns, expectations, and emotional context. The seams of this construction are usually invisible, but in the moments of déjà vu, something in the assembly process becomes briefly visible, not the content of a past experience, but the mechanism itself. The way the present moment is being built. It is a strange thing to perceive. And then it passes, and the world resumes its ordinary feeling of simply being there. You can let that idea dissolve now. Let the images it raises soften and disperse. The body has a quiet relationship with emotional states that many of us never fully examine. When we feel an emotion, we tend to think of it as something the mind experiences and the body then reflects. But the direction of influence runs both ways, continuously, and the body's contribution to emotional experience is larger than it might seem. Consider the experience of anxiety. The racing heart, the tightened chest, the shallow breathing, the tension in the shoulders and jaw. We tend to understand these as symptoms of anxiety, as the body responding to a mental state. But researchers have found that the body's signals, when they are fed back to the brain through the nervous system, actively contribute to the experience of anxiety itself. Slow, deliberate breathing can reduce the felt intensity of anxiety not only because it calms the body, but because the calm signals from the body change what the brain infers about the emotional situation. The brain, receiving quieter information from the periphery, adjusts its assessment. The feeling changes. This bidirectional communication is one of the reasons that practices involving the body, movement, breath, posture, physical sensation can have genuine effects on mental and emotional states. It is not that these practices are tricks or distractions. It is that they introduce real information into a loop that runs between body and brain, and that information can shift the system toward a different equilibrium. Right now, you are breathing. The rhythm of your breath is part of a continuous conversation between your body and your brain. Each slow exhale carries a small signal of safety. Each unhurried inhale allows the system to rest. You do not need to control this deliberately. Simply by lying still and breathing at your natural pace, you are already participating in the quieting of the system. Let your breath be easy. Let it do what it knows how to do. There is a particular tendency of the mind that has been studied under the name of the spotlight effect, and it describes something many people recognize once it is named. We tend to believe, in social situations especially, that we are more visible to others than we actually are. That the small stumble, the awkward pause, the slightly wrong word, the garment that doesn't quite sit right, these things are being noticed and assessed and remembered by the people around us in something like the proportion that they occupy our own attention. But other people, it turns out, are primarily occupied with their own inner world. They are managing their own anxiety, monitoring their own performance, attending to their own train of thought. The degree to which they are carefully observing us is, in most circumstances, considerably smaller than we imagine. This has been demonstrated in experiments with a straightforward design. Participants were asked to enter a room wearing a t-shirt with an embarrassing or distinctive image on it, and to estimate afterward what percentage of the people in the room had noticed the shirt. Their estimates were consistently higher, sometimes dramatically higher, than the actual percentage of people who could recall seeing it. The spotlight effect is not a character flaw. It emerges from the perfectly natural fact that we experience our own inner life directly and with full detail, while we only observe others from the outside. Of course, our own concerns seem large and central. They are, for us, what is most immediately present. The mistake is only in assuming that this prominence is shared. In a quieter sense, understanding this can be a source of relief. The imagined audience that watches your small failures is smaller than it seems, and far less attentive. Most of the judgment we anticipate from others lives primarily in our own minds. Let that sit gently. You are less observed than you fear, and more at liberty than you sometimes feel. Breathe out slowly. The dark room around you holds no audience. Psychologists have studied a phenomenon called the bystander effect, and its findings say something important about the relationship between responsibility and the presence of others. In a series of now well-known experiments, researchers staged situations in which a person appeared to need help. Sometimes a single bystander was present. Sometimes many people were, and what emerged, consistently, was that the more people were present, the less likely any individual was to intervene. The mechanism behind this is not callousness. It is something more subtle and more worth understanding. When we find ourselves in a situation that might require action, we look to those around us for cues about how to respond. If others seem calm, or seem not to be acting, we infer that the situation is perhaps not as urgent as it first appeared. We also, when many people are present, feel a diffusion of personal responsibility. There are others here. Someone else will handle it. The duty is shared, and therefore belongs to no one fully. When a person is alone and encounters a situation requiring help, neither of these mechanisms can operate. The responsibility cannot be diffused because there is no one else to diffuse it to. The cues from others are absent. The individual stands in clear, unmediated relationship to the situation, and action becomes more likely. This finding is not merely a commentary on group dynamics. It is also a reminder of something about personal moral attention. The awareness that responsibility can quietly evaporate in a crowd, that the presence of others can reduce rather than reinforce the impulse to act, is itself a kind of protection against the effect. Those who know about it, researchers have found, are somewhat more likely to act even in crowded situations. Awareness functions as a counterweight. There is something in this worth carrying, not anxiously, but quietly. Each of us is, in many moments, the only person in exactly the right position to notice what is happening. And in those moments, something simple and important rests with us alone. Let that thought settle and then soften. You don't need to carry it right now. Right now, the night asks nothing but stillness. When we sleep, the brain does not simply power down and wait for morning. It is, in many ways, more active in certain respects than during waking hours. Different stages of sleep perform different functions, and among them, certain stages are associated with a process of memory consolidation that is essential for learning and growth. During the night, the hippocampus, a structure deeply involved in forming new memories, works to transfer information from the recent past into longer-term storage distributed across the cortex. This consolidation is not a passive copying process. It involves a selective strengthening of some memories and a weakening of others, guided by patterns of neural activity that replay the experiences of the day in compressed, reorganized form. Researchers have found that skills practiced just before sleep are often better retained after a night's rest than they would be after an equivalent period of wakefulness. The sleeping brain seems to continue working on what was learned, finding the structure within it, sorting what is important from what is peripheral, and anchoring it more firmly. There is also evidence that certain kinds of problem-solving happen during sleep. The sleeping brain, freed from the constraints of waking logic and the pressure of focused attention, can explore more unusual connections between ideas. The relationship between remote concepts can become visible. Solutions that felt impossible at midnight can feel obvious in the morning, not because circumstances have changed, but because the sleeping mind found a path through the material that waking thought had not. This is worth knowing as you lie here now. Your brain will not stop working when you fall asleep. It will continue, quietly, with the material of your day, sorting it, processing it, building it into something more durable and more usable. You don't need to do anything to help this along. You only need to allow the sleep to come, and it will come. It always does. Let your thoughts drift a little more freely now. There is no destination they need to reach. Let them wander at their own pace, unhurried, following no particular thread. There is something curious and touching in what research has found about nostalgia. It is not only an emotional experience, It appears to have a physical dimension. When people recall cherished memories from their past, especially warm ones involving connection and belonging, studies have found that their perception of temperature shifts slightly. They feel warmer in environments made artificially cold. Those who were prompted toward nostalgic reflection reported less discomfort than those who were not. This connection between social warmth and physical warmth is not merely metaphorical. The brain regions involved in processing social bonds and those involved in registering physical temperature share overlapping territory. The felt warmth of belonging, of being cared for, of remembering a time when life held something good and familiar, has a measurable effect on how the body registers its environment. People in winter months, researchers have observed, show greater nostalgic tendencies than people in warm months. As if the mind reaches naturally for remembered warmth when the body is cold. As if memory can, in a small but real way, serve as a source of comfort that has something physical in it, alongside everything emotional. This is a quiet gift of the mind, that the past, properly remembered, can warm the present. That a moment held tenderly in memory has not only the emotional texture of what it meant, but a faint physical residue, something the body can feel alongside the heart. You may have a memory like that. A time that carries warmth in it, not just as metaphor, but as a genuine, felt quality. You don't need to find it or name it now. Simply knowing it is there, held somewhere in the architecture of your nervous system, is enough. Let your body feel whatever warmth it finds in this quiet moment. Let it be whatever it is. Your breathing is slower now. The thoughts are moving more softly. The details of the day are becoming less distinct, less insistent. This is as it should be. The mind has a particular way of organizing experience that psychologists call the primacy and recency effect, and it operates more or less continuously in every sequence of events you encounter. The first item in a series tends to be remembered well because it receives the most initial attention and is rehearsed in working memory before subsequent items arrive. The last item in a series tends to be remembered well because it is still fresh when recall is attempted. The items in the middle, cushioned on both sides by more memorable material, tend to fade more quickly. This pattern appears in how we remember conversations. The opening exchanges and the closing moments tend to linger more vividly than the middle passage. It appears in how we experience trips and events. The arrival and the departure carry particular clarity. The days in between can blur together, even when they were full of experience. Understanding this tendency can change how we approach important experiences. Placing something you want to remember at the beginning or end of a learning session gives it an advantage. Beginning and ending conversations with what matters most increases the likelihood that those things will be carried forward. The architecture of a sequence shapes what survives it. But there is a gentler implication too. The middle is not lost. It is simply held differently. The texture of lived experience, the accumulation of ordinary moments that constitute most of a life, the quiet middle passages that do not carry the heightened clarity of beginnings and endings, but that are, in many ways, the substance of what we are. All of this is woven into the self, even when it cannot be easily retrieved as specific memories. The middle of your life is not disappearing, it is settling, becoming part of the ground you stand on, rather than the landmarks you can point to. You can let that be a quiet comfort as you rest. The mind becomes slightly more creative when it is mildly fatigued. This may seem counterintuitive. We tend to associate good thinking with alertness, with a rested and energetic mind operating at full capacity. And for many kinds of mental work, that association holds. But for a particular kind of thinking, the kind that requires making unexpected connections, seeing unlikely relationships between ideas, moving outside established patterns, mild fatigue can actually loosen the constraints that sharper alertness maintains. When the mind is fully alert and engaged, the prefrontal cortex is heavily involved in managing thought. It keeps things organized, relevant, on topic. It filters out distractions and tangents. This is useful when precision and focus are required, but it also means that unusual, peripheral, unexpected connections tend to be suppressed before they can surface. In a mildly tired mind, this filtering loosens. The boundaries between categories become slightly more permeable. Ideas that wouldn't ordinarily be placed in proximity to each other can drift together. The mind wanders, and in wandering, can stumble onto something it would not have found by direct approach. This is part of why some people find their most interesting ideas in the drowsy period before sleep. The thinking is not rigorous or precise in those moments, but it is wide and loose and associative in ways that more controlled thinking cannot quite manage. You are in that territory now. The ideas that have been passing through tonight's narration may recombine in ways you haven't directed. Fragments may find each other. Questions may surface that you didn't arrive with. This is not something to grasp at. Simply let it happen, softly, in the background, the way the brain's night work always happens. Without urgency, finding its own way through the material of the day. Let your thoughts wander freely. There is nowhere they need to be. The concept of neuroplasticity, which has appeared gently at several points throughout this evening's journey, is perhaps one of the most quietly hopeful discoveries in modern neuroscience. For most of the history of brain science, it was believed that the brain's structure was essentially fixed after a certain period of development, that the neural architecture you arrived at in adulthood was more or less what you would carry for the rest of your life, that the capacity for fundamental change in the brain was limited to childhood and adolescence, after which the structure solidified and the possibilities for growth narrowed. What researchers have learned, particularly over the last several decades, is that this view was too fixed, too static. The brain retains the capacity for structural change throughout life, not at the same rate or in the same forms as childhood learning, but genuinely and measurably. New skills form new pathways. Repeated experiences strengthen existing connections and allow unused ones to thin. Patterns of thought that are consistently practiced become, over time, the default patterns of the brain. And patterns that are not used gradually recede. This means that what you attend to, what you practice, what you return to day after day, has a physical effect on the organ that generates your experience of being alive. The things you choose to do and think and feel are not only habits. They are, in a very real sense, ongoing instructions to the brain about what kind of structure to maintain and reinforce. This is not an anxious responsibility. It is more like a quiet fact that can be held with a sense of possibility. At any age and in any state, the brain is still listening to experience, still adjusting, still capable of change. You are not finished. Whatever patterns have been built, whatever pathways have become habitual, the possibility of something different is always at least partly open. The brain's willingness to be shaped by what it encounters continues as long as you are here, encountering things. Let that thought be whatever it is for you. Something to carry gently, not urgently. A door that doesn't need to be walked through right now, but that is not locked. Your eyes are heavy. Your body is soft and still. The thoughts are arriving more slowly now, with more space between them. This is the direction of sleep. Everything moving in the right direction. The research on flow states offers something that feels genuinely important about the quality of human experience. Flow, as psychologists describe it, is a mental condition characterized by complete absorption in an activity. The sense of self temporarily recedes. Time loses its normal texture. Effort feels effortless, not because the task is easy, but because the engagement is so complete that the self-monitoring that usually accompanies effort has stepped back. Researchers have found that flow tends to occur most reliably when the challenge of a task is well matched to the person's current level of skill. Too easy, and the mind becomes bored and wanders. Too difficult, and anxiety begins to interfere. But in the narrow range, where challenge and capacity are in balance, something opens. The task becomes absorbing in a way that nothing else quite matches. Brain imaging studies of people in flow states show reduced activity in the prefrontal cortex, particularly in regions associated with self-monitoring and self-referential thought. In flow, the part of the mind that watches and evaluates and worries about how things are going quiets down. What remains is attention in its purest form, fully directed, fully present, not divided between the task and observation of the self doing the task. People who have experienced deep flow often describe it as among the most satisfying states they know. Not pleasant in the way relaxation is pleasant, but satisfying in a different way. A sense of being fully used, fully present, fully alive in the doing of something. The hours that pass in flow feel, in retrospect, like minutes, not because nothing happened, but because the attention was so fully engaged that time's ordinary texture was suspended. You may know this experience from something in your own life, a craft, a practice, a kind of work, or play in which you have lost yourself completely, the mind fully occupied, the self temporarily transparent, the world reduced to the thing at hand. Right now, the thing at hand is simply rest, and there is, in its own way, a kind of flow available in the drift toward sleep, the self becoming quieter, the monitoring easing, the boundaries between thought and non-thought growing softer and less distinct. You don't need to pursue this. It will find you. Let it. Let the edges of your thoughts blur gently. Let the space between awareness and sleep become wider and more welcoming. There is a quiet truth in what psychologists have learned about the relationship between expectation and experience, one that extends beyond the placebo sleep effect we touched on earlier. The mind does not receive experience passively. It constructs it, and in that construction, what it expects to find shapes what it finds. This is not self-deception. It is the normal operation of a brain that needs to process the world faster than the world can be fully analyzed. When you move through a familiar room in the dark, you don't collide with the furniture because your brain has already predicted where everything is and is using that prediction to guide your movement. When you read a sentence with the word misselgeist, you often don't notice the error because your brain has already predicted the correct word and reads that instead. When you hear someone speak in a noisy environment, you understand them better than the signal quality alone would allow because your brain fills in what it cannot hear with what it expects to hear. Expectation is a kind of scaffolding that the mind constructs from experience, and it does the majority of its perceptual work not by waiting for the world to deliver clear signals, but by generating its best current hypothesis about what the world contains and then updating that hypothesis as new information arrives. The conscious experience of perceiving reality is largely the experience of that hypothesis, that ongoing prediction, rather than a direct recording of what is out there. This has implications that run in many directions. It means that changing what you habitually expect can change what you experience. Not by changing the world, but by changing the lens through which the world is processed. The person who expects to find difficulty often does, not because the world is arranged to frustrate them, but because the prediction shapes what the brain notices and how it interprets what it notices. The person who expects to find something of value often does, for the same reason. This is not a call to forced optimism or to the denial of genuine difficulty. It is simply a description of how the machinery works. And the machinery can, with patience and attention, be gently reoriented. Not all at once, not through effort alone, but gradually, through the slow accumulation of experiences that begin to revise the standing hypothesis. The mind you carry is not fixed in its expectations. It is always, in every moment, building its model of the world from what it has encountered. And what it encounters next can begin, quietly, to revise what it has built. Let that possibility rest softly somewhere in you. You don't need to do anything with it tonight. The soft chemistry of kindness is worth resting in for a moment before the narration draws toward its close. Research has found, with some consistency, that acts of generosity toward others produce measurable effects in the person performing them. Oxytocin levels rise, stress hormones fall, cardiovascular indicators shift in the direction of ease. The immune system receives a small but detectable benefit. This has been called the helper's high, and it reflects something that runs deeper than politeness or social convention. The nervous system appears to be organized in such a way that extending care to others registers as something good, not only emotionally, but biochemically, as if the body recognizes generosity as a signal that the social environment is safe, that connection is present, that the conditions for belonging are being maintained. Even witnessing kindness, observing someone else act generously or compassionately, can produce some of these effects in an observer. The mirror systems of the brain that allow us to simulate others' experiences extend into their emotional and social dimensions. We feel, faintly, what we see others feel, and the warmth that accompanies an act of care can ripple outward through those who witness it. This means that kindness is not only a gift to its recipient. It moves through the social environment in ways that reach beyond the two people directly involved. It changes the texture of the space it occurs in, and the person who initiates it receives, quietly and without asking. A portion of what they have given. You have, in your life, extended kindness to others. Perhaps not always as fully or as generously as you wished, but in ways that were real, and that had effects you may not have been able to trace. Those acts left something in the world, and they left something in you, quietly reorganizing the chemistry of your nervous system in small ways each time. That is something to hold, not with pride, but with a quiet sense of continuity. The kindness you have offered is part of the structure of who you are. It lives in the neural patterns of your brain alongside everything else that has shaped you. Let your body feel easy and still. There is nothing required of you right now. Not kindness, not effort, not understanding, only rest. The sense of purpose, as researchers have found, has effects that reach into the body in ways that are not purely psychological. People who report a strong sense of meaning, a sense that their life is organized around something that matters to them, something worth getting up for, tend to show lower levels of inflammatory markers in the blood. They tend to have lower rates of certain chronic illnesses. They tend, statistically, to live longer. This is not because meaning is a form of medicine in any literal sense. It is because the presence of purpose shapes behavior, attention, and the body's ongoing management of its own systems. A person with a strong sense of purpose is more likely to maintain habits that support health. They are more likely to engage socially, to persist through difficulty, to maintain the kind of forward orientation that keeps the stress response from becoming the brain's default mode. Purpose does not need to be grand. Researchers have found that the benefits are not restricted to people pursuing large, world-shaping goals. The person who finds deep meaning in caring for a child or an elderly parent, in tending a garden, in practicing a craft, in contributing to a small community, in pursuing a form of creative work that no one else may ever see, shows the same physiological benefits as those whose purpose is more publicly legible. What matters is the genuine sense that something is worth doing, that there is a reason to be present and engaged with the days. You have things that matter to you. Perhaps not always clearly or completely, perhaps with uncertainty about some of them, but something that orients you toward the future, that gives certain hours a quality of meaning that others don't quite have, that makes you glad, in some moments, to be the specific person you are, in the specific time you occupy. Hold that very softly. Let it be whatever it is, not a demand, not a pressure, but a quiet companionship. A sense that the days ahead are not empty of significance, and then let even that drift gently away. Right now, the night has no demands. Right now, there is only the warmth of where you are lying, and the quiet and the slow movement of your breath. There is one more thing that deserves a moment of gentle reflection before the narration settles into its final quiet. The fact that we can reflect on the mind at all. That the same organ which generates experience can, with effort and curiosity and the collective patience of centuries of inquiry, turn its attention toward itself and begin to understand its own workings. This is genuinely remarkable. Consciousness, whatever it ultimately is, involves among its properties the capacity to become curious about itself, to ask not only what is happening in the world, but what is happening in here, in the process of experiencing the world. This kind of recursive attention, the mind studying the mind, is at the heart of psychology as a discipline, and at the heart of the broader human project of self-understanding. And yet, for all that has been learned, for all the careful experiments, and the brain imaging studies, and the decades of accumulated research we've wandered through tonight, the deepest questions remain genuinely open. What is consciousness? Why is there experience at all, rather than simply neural processing that happens without any felt quality? How does the physical activity of neurons give rise to the sense of being someone, of having a perspective, of knowing that something matters? Researchers do not yet have answers to these questions. The hard problem of consciousness, as philosophers call it, the question of why there is something it is like to be you, remains unsolved, not for lack of trying, but because the question cuts down to a level that our current tools cannot yet reach. This is not a failure. It is a measure of how deep the mystery goes. And there is something calming, rather than troubling, in the recognition of it. You are participating in something that no one fully understands. Not the scientists who study it, not the philosophers who theorize about it, not anyone. The experience of being conscious, of having this inner life that is yours and no one else's, is both the most familiar thing in the world and the most unexplained. You have lived inside it every moment since you were born, and it remains, at its core, a genuine and beautiful mystery. You don't need to solve it. No one can solve it tonight. What you can do is simply inhabit it, be in it. Let it be what it is. The quiet, intimate, utterly private experience of being here, in this body, in this room, in this moment, drifting towards sleep in the dark. The day has been whatever it was. It is over now. It has passed into the permanent record of the past, where nothing can touch it anymore. And the night is here, gentle and uncomplicated, asking only one thing of you, simply this: to rest. Your thoughts may continue to move for a while, and that is fine. They will slow on their own. The mind has its own rhythm as it descends towards sleep, and it does not need to be controlled or managed or guided. It knows the way. It has found it thousands of times before. Every sleep you have ever had has followed the same path, moving from the activity of waking consciousness through the softer edges of drowsiness into the deeper territories of rest, where memory consolidates and the body repairs itself, and something in the brain moves quietly through the residue of the day. You are already on that path. The fact that you are here, still, in the dark, your body heavy and easy, your thoughts moving more slowly than they were an hour ago, already marks the beginning of the journey. You don't need to hurry it. It will complete itself. The mind you have been exploring tonight, this vast and largely unknown territory that lives just behind your eyes, will continue its work while you sleep. It will sort through the ideas that passed through this evening, and some of them will settle and become part of the structure of what you know, and others will dissolve entirely, and most will simply become part of the background, the accumulated experience that shapes how you move through the world without your ever consciously accessing it. And that is enough. You don't need to hold on to anything. The mind will keep what it keeps and release what it releases. And in the morning, you will be slightly different than you are now. Not dramatically, but in the small, incremental way that every day leaves its trace. Every experience adds its tiny weight to the architecture of who you are. The stars are above you right now, even if you cannot see them. The atmosphere that holds this planet is thinner than the skin of an apple relative to the whole, and beyond it, the same darkness that has always been there. The same ancient light traveling from sources unimaginably distant. The same structures of matter and energy and time that contain everything that has ever happened. And here, in the middle of all of that, a brain, your brain, has been lying in the dark, thinking about itself, wondering about its own workings, catching glimpses of the hidden machinery through which it builds the world you inhabit. This is one of the quieter miracles. Not dramatic, not loud, but real and deep and worth resting in. The mind is strange. Memory is malleable. Attention is selective and exhaustible and precious. Emotions shape what we see and how we move through the world. The body and the brain speak to each other in languages that are only now being translated. Other people affect us in ways that reach into our chemistry, our neurology, our sense of who we are. We forget almost everything, and what we remember we have changed in the remembering. We form first impressions in fractions of a second, and carry those impressions for years. We are susceptible to the opinions of groups and the authority of perceived experts, and the quiet influence of smells, and the repetition of ideas we have not examined. And underneath all of this, underneath the ordinary activity of daily life, there is a process, continuous and only partially understood, by which raw experience becomes self, and the self becomes capable of experiencing more. It is strange and beautiful, and more than enough to lie quietly with. You don't need to understand all of it. Nobody does. The researchers who have spent careers exploring these questions will tell you, if you ask them honestly, that every answer they have found has revealed new regions of not knowing. The map they have drawn covers more territory than any previous map, and it reveals more unmapped space than any previous map as well. The more carefully you look, the larger the mystery becomes, and that is not discouraging. It is simply the nature of genuine inquiry. For now, let all of the questions go. Let the ideas that have moved through this evening's narration settle, or dissolve, or find their own quiet resting places wherever they will. You don't need to organize them, or evaluate them, or decide what to keep. The mind will do what it does with them, and in the morning, whatever it has made of them will be there, or it won't, and either way the day will be workable. Your breathing is soft and slow. Your body is still. The warmth around you is holding you without effort. Everything is moving in the right direction. The day is far away now, receding gently into the past where it belongs. The night is here, and it is large and quiet and full of nothing that requires anything from you. Sleep will come the way it always comes. Not when you try for it, but when you stop trying. Not when you pursue it, but when you simply rest and allow the natural drift to carry you where it will. You have done this before. You will do it now. Let your thoughts become like shapes in fog. Present and then softening. Present and then gone. There is no need to follow them. No need to catch them before they disappear. They can go. They can dissolve completely. The mind knows how to let go when the body is still, and the night is quiet and there is nothing left to manage. If these quiet evenings with deep somna help you find your way to rest, you are always welcome to return. The journeys are here whenever you need them, whenever the mind needs somewhere gentle to wander before sleep arrives. For now, there is only the dark and the quiet, and the soft movement of your breath, and the vast and mostly undiscovered territory of your own mind, settling into its night. Rest now. You are already almost there.